Welcome to episode 10 of the Manage to Win podcast. Today we have Paul Kingsman. Paul's an Olympian, a former Olympian, speaker, coach for the financial services industry. And he's also the author of the Distraction Proof Advisor. He's a good friend of ours. Paul, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Great to be back.
Paul, you're from New Zealand. Can you tell me exactly how many sheep are in New Zealand?
The last time we counted, it was over 60 million.
Really?
Yeah. There are a lot. We're just hoping they never get smart because they are.
Yeah, if they ever gain a higher consciousness, you guys are in trouble.
Yeah, we're in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
Be like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, but with sheep.
That's right. Yeah.
I didn't think you would actually have an answer for that. That sounded very serious. You're serious.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of them.
That's great. That's great. And Paul, you work a lot with financial services advisors now. You're a speaker and an author, and you consult, right? You consult with financial services advisors.
Yep, that's correct. I've been around the industry or involved in the industry since 2001. After coming back from New Zealand to the US and starting at Morgan Stanley. So I've been doing it now for over 18 years and speaking to groups and also coaching individual advisors. Yes.
So, I'm curious. I hate to interrupt so early, but it struck me as it's like the financial advisor piece, not CPAs or accountants so much, but financial advisors. And do you find that for at least the ones that contact you and work with you, that they're actually, very savvy at what they do, but sometimes through your coaching, it actually helps them ultimately give better advice to their clients? Because I just think so often some of these financial advisors don't do a good job as far as rate of return. And yet, if you help them get focused more, does that ever result in them actually doing a better job for their clients as far as what they're recommending, how the client manages their money or that type of thing? I'm curious.
It can do directly, because one of the areas that I do help out with is setting up structures, especially relative to model portfolios. But past that, I don't have any direct influence or refer them various funds or what have you. What I would say is the feeling of being able to cope far more effectively, the peace of mind they have, the more rest they can get, has them far more enjoying their role down the track. And so they can see usually at that point they're really reaping the benefits. Interestingly, while hopefully their clients are seeing that as well, their home life is turning way more positive. But it is funny because when I have these calls with advisors, the ones who start throwing out question after question after question, while I'm just wanting to see if it's going to be a good fit, and want as much information as they can get, I kind of realize about 15 minutes into the call, they're not going to come on board. They're usually wanting quick fixes. They're usually thinking it's just a matter of an idea and that they'll then run with that. And the funny thing is, it's the advisors who are often earning and making a great income. They're just right to the point. I'm struggling in this area. We're growing. I need an outside pair of eyes who knows the industry. I've heard about you, read about you, and when can we start?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because they recognize that, I was talking with a $1 billion producer in Southern California. She's worked with a coach for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And you'd think she'd be the last one who needs one, but she's the first one to realize this is how I got to $1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was looking for. And that's what I was wondering. It's that it comes down to a lot of times their ability to focus.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, these are by and large smart people. They're intelligent people. Although they're intelligent people. The financial services industry is a bit of an anomaly because you can get Series 7 licensed. You can be sitting across the table from $1 million family with no college degree. I mean, obviously it takes that now to get your CFP. Whereas if you look at a dentist or a doctor and you look at the extra money and time they've got to commit to then go through graduate school, to then do their residency program, it's no wonder why when they come out and you walk into a dentist's office, there's a process. There is a structure for everything. Because these people recognize, they've been trained to realize you've got to have a system. Financial advisors, on the other hand, they're getting better, I think, as an industry. But there are still people out there that think they can just keep growing and keep clipping stuff on until one day they get to a point of, I can't take this vertical. This is as far as I can get without some help.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting seeing it happen.
And you help a lot with that.
I do. And what's interesting is that much of the time, the advisors have the pieces there. It's kind of like a crossword puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle. The actual pieces are there, but like many times in our lives, we're so close to it, we can't step back and get perspective. And so, for instance, there's an advisor I've just started working with in Texas who has really 3 different channels to his business. Fascinating how he's built it up. And so hearing what his needs were, it was a matter of being able to say, hey, relative to this channel, relative to this focus, let's focus on this area first, because once these pieces are in place, the other 2 areas you can now scale and then bring offshoot business from those areas and know that you're going to deal with it down this channel perfectly and nothing's going to fall between the cracks. And I was on the call with him 2 days ago and hearing his excitement. And he's got, some challenges there. He's looking after his ailing father. This guy's probably late 40s. His dad's 70, so he's taking care of him. 3 children. Family's going great, but now he's finally got just a sense of structure.
Yeah.
And a way he's already within the last 2 weeks, he's so excited about what he's seeing really transform in his business, and it's right there in front of him. And it's just like when I was swimming, I'll never forget. We had somebody come and video our training session when I was about 12 years old, and there were probably no more than 6 people per lane in the pool. I could not pick myself out. I mean, I was pretty sure I knew what I looked like, but I couldn't. You'd never seen yourself swim. And it really showed me that when an outside set of eyes can then take a look, they can correct the stroke. They can see things we never see. So it's always fun seeing these people manage that and attain that. And then encourage them, hey, this is within you to start with. This is nothing magical that I bring to the party. It's just another outside set of eyes.
Yeah. So let me rewind you there. You just said you were 12 when they started taking video of you swimming?
Yeah, well, I remember it vividly. We were at a training camp about 2 hours out of Auckland. We used to go away every January to a training camp, and we had a squad of about 30 or 40 swimmers. And so this was one of the first times we were going to start using video. Of course, at that stage, these things look like you're carrying a TV camera over your shoulder. And yeah.
Is it black and white?
You could take a whopping 30 minutes at a time. The hour version was going to come out in 2 years, and that would be exciting. But I was watching, and I can remember the video so vividly because I could not pick myself out. Now fast forward that to 1986 when I came over and started swimming on the UC Berkeley program. Every Thursday we would have what was called water circuit. And we would have one space in the pool that had 4 video cameras across that lane. They would have one at the top, one looking at you below, and 2 coming from you at either side. And so we could break down every piece of the stroke.
Wow.
But I'll never forget Matt Biondi, who was the world record holder then, coming to me one Saturday morning and saying, hey, do you mind if we come into the pool on Sunday morning? He said, I just want you to check something out with my turn coming off the wall. And that was a world record holder. But as he said, I can't see what I'm doing with this particular point in the streamline. And he said, you got great walls. But he said, I can't see myself. So real indication of how we need to keep getting outside input and feedback, and from people you trust. That's another key to really being successful, is from people you really trust and who have credibility to give you that feedback.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, how do you find people that you trust to give you that feedback?
It takes time to develop the relationship. Often so for instance, when I get an advisor call me, my inclination, I want to, you want to help. So oftentimes over the last number of years, I've given away just a load of information because that, hey, this is within you. It's just restructuring some things and you'll be fine. But I think when you're receiving help or looking for help, you filter people carefully. I know, for instance, there are certain people that I will permit to have access into my life to influence me. Now, ultimately, when you look at things like Facebook or LinkedIn, and I love using LinkedIn, but really what's happening out there at the moment is everybody wants the opportunity to influence other people. And whereas before, back in the 1700s, where you literally only had the proverbial one soapbox per community, not now. Everybody's got access to you and wants to tell you what you need to know. And so you've got to really be discerning when you're allowing somebody to have input into your life and to influence you.
Yeah, there's a lot of distractions out there.
There are a lot of distractions out there. I mean, now in our industry, at least, it's. I was reading an article yesterday that was saying it's taking now 11 to 12 touches and contacts with people before you're even getting a reasonable first response. Now, I remember when it used to be 6, and then it went to 8. Well, now it's 12. Because I think we're getting so used to just keeping everything and everybody at arm's length because there's so much stuff coming at us that sometimes it can be a little more difficult now to really distill down, hey, that is something of use. That is someone who should be listened to. That is somebody I should make time for. And I mean, I'll be honest, I struggle with that myself, because there are a lot of great ideas out there. And this is coming back to a swimming picture. For me, we had 3 to 4 items. When I was training for the 1988 Olympics, we had 3 to 4 key core items that we focused on. And what I tell people from that is that by default, number 5 suggestion to me from someone else may work perfectly for 99% of everyone else. There may be total legitimacy with what they're saying. But for me, because we had our 4 items, the 5th one by default, no matter how great it sounds, is a total distraction. So, it's important to know what you need to start with.
Well, and I like the way you put that. You didn't say it was number 5 was a bad idea.
Nope.
Just it's a distraction because your expert, your coach, or whoever has identified with you, do these 3 or 4. That's going to play to your strengths. That's how you're going to make the difference. And I think you should complete your Olympic story about how that difference played out and when you finally went to the Olympics and competed.
Sure. Yeah, so I went to the 1984 Olympics as a 17-year-old. immature teenager and learned a lot about how to learned a lot about how to focus, but didn't focus very well at all. Unfortunately, I had another opportunity in 1988. New Zealand never had a male Olympic swimming medalist. So, there was history there where no male had ever won a swimming medal. And my event was the 200 meters backstroke event, which every listener knows is the blue ribbon event of any Olympic Games. That's the usual response I get from audiences. So we had a goal time of 2 minutes, and it was a 4-lap race, 200 meters backstroke. Our goal time was 2 minutes. So a couple of things with that. Firstly, even if I swum 2 minutes, there's no guarantee I'm going to win a medal. And today what we have, I think, are a lot of people who almost want the guarantees before they start doing the work, before they start doing the diligent effort. And that just doesn't work. And so, importantly, we had a time for every lap. The first lap was to be swum in 28 seconds. The second lap was to be swum in 30 seconds. The third lap in 30. The fourth lap in 30 seconds, which is really hard to do, because it means while your body is actually fatiguing, you're telling it and making it go faster. But we've done our research, and my coach had looked back for the last 60 years, and what he'd seen in the split times were that every backstroker who won a medal, their fourth lap was as fast as their second lap. So for us, that's what we were focused on. So, when I turned in the first lap of the 4-lap race, I was in 7th place. And I say that, I use that with audiences to point out the race isn't over at the end of the first lap of a 4-lap race. No one's handing out medals. The end matters. It's how you finish. And so at the end of the second lap, I was in 5th place. In the middle of the third lap on the video, you can see where you make that conscious decision to keep going, to just go hard, because the third turn's going to hurt, your legs are numb, and it's just going to hurt, and you've got to be committed to it before you do it. And anyway, when I came off the third turn, I accidentally saw the scoreboard because I was in lane 1, so I was top of the scoreboard. And you never look at the board. But I accidentally saw it, and I just remember thinking someone's got to die, but it's not going to be me. And coming into the last couple of strokes, seeing the flash go up on the board and the flash go up for the second place, and then there's one left. And I remember thinking, you break your fingers, you'll break your hand, you've just got to get onto that wall next. And I hit, and then there were 2 flashes in a split second. And when I looked up, I saw that I'd come in third, because there's the number 3 beside your name. And it wasn't until I was getting ready for the medal presentation that the radio New Zealand guy burst into the room, and he told me that I'd won a medal by 4/100ths of a second. And when I looked at the video, and I would watch this video regularly, but for some reason, about 1.5 to 2 years later, when I looked at the video, I noticed the guy who came fourth to me and was 4/100ths of a second behind me actually looked with about 4 meters to go on his third to last stroke, and then he looked again at me. And so you see the cost of distraction, and you see the price that's paid. Just as an interesting aside, this isn't a story. Just what I want to mention next, I don't really mention it to audiences. There was a guy by the name of Artie Shaw, and Artie was the secretary of FINA. FINA's like FIFA in soccer. FINA is the world swimming body. And right before they lined us up to go out onto pool deck before the final. So we all had to, go out and line up and get ready to race. And Artie came up to me, and he's from New Zealand. So he's a Kiwi, and he was actually from my home club, Mount Roskill Swimming Club. And so, of course, Artie's there in his blazer and FINA gear and FINA tie and the whole thing. He's passed away now. But he came up to me and he said, I just wanted to let you know I've requested to present the medals for your event. And then he started to turn away and walk away, and he came back to me and he said, I'll see you in 5 minutes. And so that was it was one of those memories where when you talk about people believing in you, especially as you go into battle, especially as you go into the heat of battle, and you know it's going to get tough. It never hurts to have people just convey confidence in you, that you're ready for this. And with that, we left. And then so at the medal presentation, when he gives me the not the medal, he was presenting the little the bunch of flowers to us. He hands them up to me. He's like, I told you we'd be back together in 5 minutes. So yeah, you need to support people with you.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a great story. I'm ready to swim, man. Let's go. Do it.
Yeah, well, you can have the backstroke.
Is that really bad? Is that a really tough one?
The backstroke, yeah.
I think
it's and people will. People often think I'm joking, but to get right down to the nitty gritty of it, backstroke's a little harder because people think it's easier because you can breathe anytime you want, because your face is obviously out of the water. The challenge with backstroke is you don't get cool. When your face is coming in and out of the water all the time, the water provides a cooling effect on your skin. With backstroke, you heat up. It's
at least right in the face.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think it's slightly a balance thing. It's kind of like doing butterfly.
Yeah.
You kind of either can do it or you can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Butterfly is a tough one too, but you're right. It's rhythm.
Yeah.
And when you get tired, usually the first thing to go is rhythm. And rhythm's super important. It always used to amuse me when we owned a swim school back in New Zealand. We'd have these amazing young little kids, and we weren't interested in running a competitive program, but we would have these kids that would really they'd get it, and they'd start to take off. And the parents would start getting all excited, like, wow, is this guy going to go to the Olympics? Or is this, we're like, don't even worry about that. But then like a couple of months later, the parents would come in and they'd say, you never guess what? John wants to forget swimming and he wants to learn the piano. And we're like, and they would look at us like, who can figure? It's like, no, that makes sense because he's so rhythmic that what you see in the water, he's just found another outlet for it, and he wants to do that and not stink of chlorine every day. And I say, go for it.
Yeah. That's funny you talk about when you get tired, the first thing to go is your rhythm. Because I immediately think about I've been climbing, rock climbing.
Right.
And the first thing to go when you get tired is your form, your technique. You start reaching really hard. You're using your upper body way more than you should. And you're starting to shake on the wall because you're going to fall if you mess up. And it's exactly right in tune with that fatigue nature. The thing that goes first is the quality.
Yeah, that's right. And then you start thinking too much.
Yeah.
And then it's a downhill spiral from there often.
Did you only swim backstroke or were there other events that you did?
So backstroke was my main stroke, but it's a good question because in 1982, I went to the Commonwealth Games for New Zealand. I was the youngest Kiwi to swim in them. But we went to Australia, and they were in September of '82. We had to qualify in May of '82. In February of '82, I went and swam in Australia at the Australian age groups, and we were focused on the 200 meters individual medley. I loved medleys. Medley is where you swim butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, freestyle. You've got to put them all together. You've got to be able to integrate every stroke. It's a little more tactical. And so I really enjoyed swimming IM. In Australia, I came third in my age group, in the 13 and 14-year-old age group. I came third in the 200 IM, but I won the 100 backstroke. And so immediately it became, I'm swimming backstroke. There was nothing, magical to it, nothing anatomically that, made me a better backstroker. It was just, I'm going to swim backstroke. But speaking about anatomy, I am short, relatively speaking. I'm short for, an international swimmer. I'm 6 foot. I have size 11 and a half feet. Our son is 23, still living in California. He has size 15 feet. He's 6'4". I mean, these are attributes that I would have died for when to swim.
Does he swim?
Yeah. I mean, he's an IT guy now, and as I've told him, there's far more money in IT than swimming. Have at
Right.
I tell people he's our future living, breathing 401k.
There you go.
But my point is, I trained with, during the age groups, I trained and competed with swimmers with far more talent than I ever had. Way more talent than I ever had. But they just couldn't stick at it. They were also good rugby players. They were also good tennis players in the summer. Winter, they played rugby. Summer, they played tennis as well as tried to swim. And that will get you so far, but there comes a point where you've then got to say, I got to focus on one thing here, and one of these sports. And unfortunately, there are many of them who were very good at many sports. But mum and dad would often have people come up to them years after the Olympics, and they would say, yeah, I know, Tom could have, been there as well, but he wanted to play rugby or wanted to do this, and just never was able to focus on that one thing.
So I'm curious, Paul, and maybe I'm going down a rabbit trail, but I just recently finished the book Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes.
And have you seen that one?
I'm halfway through it.
Okay. All right. There we go. So one of the things that really struck me in that book hard was where he talked about habits come from your identity.
Yes.
Who you think you are, what you think you are, whether you think I'm an athlete or I'm a backstroker or I'm a tennis player or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the book, as a matter of fact, at the end of the book, he says something that I didn't catch early on. And he says, the identity thing can be negative in that, like, you can identify, like I heard a talk by a guy who was sharing out as a teenager, he was going through the paces to be a professional tennis player.
Right.
And he was doing the circuit. He was at the professional camp. He was doing the whole deal.
Yeah.
He was really advancing and looking good. And then he blew out his shoulder and he got it repaired in surgery. And then he blew it out again.
Right.
And his identity was as a professional tennis player. And now that's gone.
Right.
And so he was sharing his story of then he went into some at-risk behaviors.
Right.
And he was coming back. I mean, now I think he's a youth pastor and he was, doing a sermon about it type of thing.
Right.
But, or actually I think somebody was talking about him, bragging about him that he's on staff and he's gone through this type of thing. But I'm curious, as you went through this time in your life, where you were really, you were focusing on, I want to go win an Olympic medal.
Right.
Was your core self-identity as, I'm going to be an Olympian type of thing, Olympic swimmer, or did you have something else also equally, if not more so, propelling you as part of your identity?
So absolutely, as far as my athletic endeavor, as a Christian, as a believer, I've always seen that my gifts are God-given, and the Bible really is very clear about telling us, hey, whatever you're going to do it with all your heart, mind, and soul. And so I've always taken that to heart. And so if I was going to swim, I wanted to see how fast I could swim.
Yeah.
Now, I've never wanted to beat anybody, but I can tell you now, I've never wanted anything less than to win. And they're two different things.
Very interesting.
Well, it is interesting right now, especially because in New Zealand, I saw New Zealand as a culture struggle with that, because they struggle with people just being that so focused and so intense-minded. They really struggle with that. And it's kind of interesting because when you look at our culture now in the US, although as much as I love this country and it's the best place for us to be living right now, my family, interesting to see some of that kind of dialogue entering, the public square. But yes, everything was focused on that, even to the point where I can remember, especially in 1988, but even before then, when I would have swim meets coming up, or even regarding training, if I would do nothing that would risk me having time out of the water. I wouldn't be. I stopped surfing when I was at high school. I stopped playing rugby. You take stairs holding on to the rail going down. Everything became focused solely about, I want to be in the best physical and mental condition to swim that race. So in 1988, when I was doing my build-up back in New Zealand, my parents had a spa pool built for me, which, I lived a blessed life as a child. But my parents put in a spa pool because they recognized, hey, I'm gonna be sore. You're training 6 hours a day. You are always exhausted. You are always stinging of chlorine. You're uncomfortable. You're tired. You're grumpy. So they had the spa pool put in.
So Paul, is a spa pool? Is that a hot tub?
Yeah, like a hot, yes.
Okay, great.
yeah, a jacuzzi. Yes. Sorry, glad.
Yeah. So you go sit in more chlorine, but now it's hot.
Yeah. Not to be confused with a sheep dip, which the sheep go through. That's another story. And you don't go sitting in them. But I would be down in the spa pool in this jacuzzi at night, and I would be exhausted, but I would practice doing milk commercials. And I would practice just sitting on the side of the spa pool and going through, hi, my name's Paul Kingsman and I drink milk. And in that stage, New Zealand also, they had the dairy board doing some stuff. But my whole focus was, this is what I'm going to do. This is where we're heading. And like I said, there's no looking to beat anybody, especially, at the Olympics, you can't control what the other person's going to do. So, and that took a bit of time transitioning into corporate life. Because all of a sudden, where a stopwatch was, it's either 59 or 60, or even 59 or 59.1, there's a difference. All of a sudden, when you deal corporately, some things get subjective. And all of a sudden, your definition of what should be happening, in your opinion, it's subjective. It's kind of a little more up for grabs now. That took a while to get used to.
Well, it's interesting what you just described validates what Clear puts in his book.
Right.
You made decisions on how to spend your time and whether to do this or do that because you had this piece of your identity anyway.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to make certain that I'm going to make it to the Olympics, and when I'm in the Olympics, I have the best possible chance to do the best I can.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I think it's also interesting, and I'm curious if you want to elaborate on it in the business context. I don't know whether this is what you coach your clients, but this concept of I'm going to win, but it's not I'm going to beat this person or I'm going to beat that person. That's not it.
No.
I'm going to walk away from that pool knowing that I gave it everything that I had to give.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you take that approach, you can truly respect. You can respect if you don't win. You can respect the person who did win. If you take the approach of I want to beat someone, let's just say you do beat them, and let's just say they had a bad day. And you don't swim your best time, it's like, well, what did you learn out of that? The chances are not a whole lot in retrospect. Or let's say you are trying to beat somebody and they beat you, it becomes personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it inhibits the learning you can do from the situation, from the result. So,
and it stops you from your objective of having this sincere objective that I think has more integrity of I'm going to be the best I can be.
That's right.
That's no longer the focus.
No, well, you predicate
back.
That's right. You're basically predicating that upon someone else's performance.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly silly because they're a totally different entity to start with.
Yeah.
So
and you may try to mimic something that they're doing that doesn't play to your strengths.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whereas what you brought up, you can't mimic the guy who's 6'4" and has size 15 feet.
No,
you can't. You have to go at it a different way. It's interesting, and I don't know whether Jeff, you'll let me, but Jeff had a similar experience at USF, University of San Francisco, playing soccer. Can I tell my memory of that story, Jeff?
I don't know what it is, so I'm kind of curious.
Oh, there we go. So I have carte blanche. So he basically went to USF and was a walk-on on the soccer team, and had to redshirt the first year, had some knee issues. Next 2 years, basically, did not play much. Okay. Right. The coaches were extremely toxic, negative. They like to use, negative reinforcement, basically tear people down to hopefully motivate them.
Yeah.
So he went back his third season, active season, after, 1 year redshirt, 2 seasons, basically sitting on the bench, barely playing. And he starts out, and the coach basically, says, well, Russell, you're no better than you were last year.
Right.
And he pulls his groin. And he came over to the house, and my wife and I were working outside, and he explained, he said, Dad, I pulled my groin. I'm pretty frustrated. They don't think I'm doing any better than last year anyway. I think I should just can it and stop and focus on school. And I let my wife respond first, which was a wise move. And then I just looked down and I said, so tell me this. Have you ever gone out either in practice or in any of your game time and given it 110%, given it everything you got the way you used to play it in club soccer?
Right.
And he thought for a moment and he said, no.
Right.
And I said, well, I think if that's what you're going to do, then I think that's the right decision. Hang it up and, go to school. I said, but the other option is that, you go out and starting with every practice, you give it everything you got and you leave it on the field, you leave it on the turf, if you get game time, you give it everything. And then when you look back 20 years from now, whether you sat on the bench for the rest of these next 2 years, or whether you get some playing time, you can say, I gave it everything I got.
Right. That's right.
And he went out, and I believe I remember this correctly. He went out, started working his butt off, okay? Yeah. And just a few weeks later, they went and played UCLA, and he started.
Right.
And they said, okay, Russell, you go guard their number one shooter, and you shut him down. And he did.
Yeah.
And then they were so pleased with that, they went and played Berkeley next. There's a preseason game, another preseason game. They said the same thing. Put him defensively on the best shooter. He shut him down.
Yeah.
He played every game.
Yeah.
And then when it came time to choose a captain, which the coaches did the next year, they normally had 2 or 3 captains. He was the only guy chosen as the captain his senior year.
Well done.
And that junior and senior year, they went to playoffs. They didn't make it past the first game, but he was a contributor. And although there were some real negative things because the coaches were so toxic, I mean, he really went out and played some great soccer, and
and I think that's great, and it's knowing then that you've given it everything. You've done as best you've done everything that you can. And unfortunately, a lot of people just won't. They just won't do that, or they'll rationalize things a little too quickly, and pay a price for it.
Yeah, I think it speaks to also the idea that if we focus on what's most important, if we focus on this sole activity that we only have control over.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about anything else other people are doing or getting distracted by other activities or other pursuits, even within the same activity.
Yeah.
That, those things can bog us down, and it's best we can really succeed if we focus on the things that are under our control.
Yeah. And I think too, in it's not the obvious crazy distractions that trip us up. It's actually the more subtle distractions that we can legitimize. So what I mean by that is 2 years later, after the 1988 Olympics, we had the Commonwealth Games in Auckland, New Zealand. And I was going to be retiring after that. There was no money in swimming back then. And so only because the Commonwealth Games were in Auckland, New Zealand, my hometown, of course the main sponsors were, so the Commonwealth Games are like the Pan American Games, just a little bigger. And so the sponsors were national corporations in New Zealand. And the main sponsor was a bank. And the bank came to me and asked me to do a TV commercial. So, and they paid me for that. And I rationalized that, hey, this is the last opportunity I'm going to get. Mum and Dad have paid for everything now for the last 15 years. Here's an opportunity to not only swim, but to make some money. But there was a deviation from the formula from 1988. So did one commercial, bank president called me up, said, I've just seen the commercial. We want 2 more, name your price. So I did.
Wow.
Yep, it wasn't much back then compared to today. I'll have to add another 0 or 2. But anyway, back then, so he said name your price. But it came with some strings attached. I was doing school visits. I was doing in-store promotional stuff at the bank. I was doing seemingly little things, but little things we never had to worry about in 88. Yeah. So sad story short, come the 200 meters backstroke in February of 1990 in front of my home crowd, I came second. I was beaten by a Canadian. He got nowhere near my best time. Huge disappointment. But I deviated from what we knew worked. And I think so often we can have those formulas, that formula that works. And today there is so much information that if you're seemingly putting your hands up and rejecting it, people are going to either say you're arrogant, you think you know it all, you need to keep learning, which true, we do need to keep learning. Yeah. But you need to come back to that formula that gets you there. And once you discover it, again, like you did as you went on with soccer towards the end, once you discover it, it's like, this is what's meant to be happening. This is natural for me. And sticking to it. So yeah, we pay a price, and we pay a price when we deviate, or we pay a price often when we allow others to just get a little bit too influential in our lives.
Wow.
So
I imagine this translates perfectly into your work when advising financial advisors and consulting with them.
Yeah, well, with financial advisors, it's having them realize the main focus, while they set objectives relative to how many clients they want to be working with, how many assets they want to be managing. Again, just like the result in a swimming race, they ultimately can't force that person to work with them, especially when the person initially might come in and say, you know what, you're one of 4 advisors I'm interviewing. Let's say it might be a $5-10 million family. I'm looking at somebody from Merrill. I'm looking at somebody from Morgan Stanley. I'm looking at somebody from Chase or JP Morgan, whatever it is. You're one of 5. And that's okay. it's so important to just focus on the process. And yes, you've got the overarching goal in your mind. Hey, this is where I want to be by January 1, 2020, or this is where I want to be by Q3 of 2019. But you got to recognize the best thing then, the most effective steps then are to commit to that process. Once you know you've got everything set, is just to commit to execution of the small steps, seemingly small steps.
Yeah.
But hugely, hugely important.
And the more you refine those steps, the better they get for you. So I remember decades ago, I was looking at life insurance, and I had a friend of the family come over. I was getting this quote, that quote, and the friend of the family said, "Well, let's slow this down a little bit." And he walked me through a process to talk about how you'd figure out what you need and what type and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I was very impressed.
Yeah.
What he was missing in his process was the tipping point to have me realize there was greater value to follow his process than there was to look at price.
Right.
So I stayed with the price.
Right.
But it was a radically different experience.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I agree with you on the process piece, being systematic, that type of thing.
Yeah, and we have, it's important to have a picture in our mind. And I would tell clients, when I was an advisor, I got no idea what it's going to cost me to retire, but I sure as heck know what I want it to look like. So we have a very clear, picture, and it's important for advisors to listen and to be able to see exactly where it is that person wants to get to. And to genuinely be able to ask those questions, and to also be confident in how they're speaking, how the advisor's speaking, and to commit to their process. When I was advising with a group, we were looking for responses or answers that would disqualify people because we knew how we were going to work. And so, if you walk into a Ford store and say you want a Prius, Ford are going to try, the person on the sales room floor, they're going to try and get you into a Leaf. But if you keep saying, "No, I really came here to buy a Prius," after a while, if they've got any intelligence at all, they're just going to say, "Toyota's 2 miles down the road. Good luck." They're not going to compromise their process for anything.
Yeah. And
again, coming back to all that information that's out there at the moment, it can be easy to do that.
Well, Paul, thanks so much for being on the podcast with us today. I know we have a little bit of a stop here at 11, so really appreciate all the insights and all the stories you shared with us. We'd love to have you on the podcast again. How can people get in touch with you? You're the author of the Distraction Proof Advisor, so I assume that's on Amazon, and you have a website? That
is on Amazon, and paulkingsman.com is my website. So you can go there, and Paul Kingsman is my email address. So you can email me there. But it's been great catching up with you both, and really enjoyed it, and look forward to staying in touch with you both.
Yeah, definitely.
Super. Thanks a lot, Paul.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.